The panel discussion that you are going to listen to is a new addition to the talks program this year. Art historians like myself like to put everything into boxes. That is early Renaissance, that is Italian, that is Spanish, that is bronze. It helps us to understand the world of art, this enormous galaxy of objects that are floating around the world. Auction houses do it as well. This is a sale of modern and contemporary art. This is British works on paper. Everything is put into little boxes. And one of the things that Frieze Masters does is it attempts to decompartmentalize everything, to return objects to this sort of wonderful soup in which they were made. Artists didn't make particular works to be British works on paper. They made them to be works of art. And the panel discussion that we're going to listen to today very much extends this approach that Frieze Masters itself is adopting. Collectors, private collectors, share a great deal of the responsibility that museums have for the objects in their care and to the artists that made those objects. But they're much freer of many of the responsibilities that museums have in terms of the way they present the works, any educational obligations, and it leads to much more personal collections, more subjective, more adventurous, more risky, but arguably also more rewarding. And the discussion today, Collecting Beyond Contemporary, brings together two collectors and a museum director. In the center, delighted to welcome Margaret Hoffman from Dallas. Margaret is not just a fabulous collector, a collector of great breadth and athleticism, but also a wonderful philanthropist who has contributed enormously, specifically to the Dallas Museum of Art, but also to Harvard and a whole host of arts and educational projects. Sitting on Margaret's left is Daniel Katz. Danny is here basically wearing two hats today. Danny is not just a passionate and very informed collector himself, but also since 1968, a dealer of primarily Old Master sculpture. Today has a gallery just moved to just off Berkeley Square and presents extraordinary objects of great beauty and importance from Old Master times to today. Danny is one of these people that they speak of in hushed tones in art world circles as having a good eye. And I think this old idea of having an eye and whether this is something entirely biological or something that can be learned is going to be part of the discussion today. And then moderating the whole conversation, I'm delighted to welcome Wim Pijbes from the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. Wim joined the museum 5 years into a decade-long renovation and oversaw the last 5 years of the renovation. It opened last year in April 2013, a completely revamped institution which we're delighted to have back on the landscape. If any of you haven't been to see the new Rijksmuseum, you must go. So thank you all for coming and have a great conversation.
Thank you, Jasper. The microphone is working, as I hear. Thank you for being with us on this first of a series of talks. Danny, Margaret, up to you. I'm the moderator, so I'm a bit in the wings of the stage. I like to start with two quotes by two prominent collectors. First is Mr. Getty saying that the romance, the zest, the excitement, suspense, thrills and triumphs that make art collecting one of the most exhilarating and satisfying of all human endeavors. That's Getty. And the other quote was in the New York Times last weekend by Leonard Lauder saying, "Before buying something, the question I always ask myself is this: if it were going to a museum, would it make the cut?" So two prominent collectors like you are, one, this Getty speaking from his heart, a kind of emotional way of collecting, and this Mr. Lauder who has a more kind of calculating way of approaching objects and would it make the cut when going to a museum. So I'm very curious on your ideas of collecting. For me as a museum director, it's of course a bit different. We collect for the National Collection with public money, and you as private collectors, you collect with your own money, which is of course unfortunately true. So maybe we have some words about that. But first, to give a bit of flavor and to illustrate what kind of collectors you are, we asked you to have some objects to show to us, to share with us. And Margaret, first is from your collection, and maybe have some words, anything you would like to say on these objects coming up to share with us.
Sure. I think I'm primarily known, to the extent I'm known at all, in the art world as a contemporary collector, but in the last 5 or 6 years, I've fallen in love with medieval illuminated manuscripts, and particularly books of hours, which kind of takes me back full circle to my graduate study days when I was studying medieval art. So this is a work by the master of Jean de Moulin from the 1520s workshop in Tours. And you're seeing an incredible example of Bathsheba at her bath. And the little figure looking down upon her obviously is King David, who desires her very much and intends to send her husband out to be killed so that he can ravish her. I find that all very interesting. In my former life, this is more than you want to know. I was married to an Anglican minister, so I'm well churched in terms of Bible stories. But what I love about this is just the sheer beauty and power, and it's to me just extremely beautiful, and reminds me obviously of kind of more manneristic tendencies. I have also manuscripts from the early 14th century that are quite different and much less robust in terms of how the subject matter is handled. But I love this. And then.
And how long ago did you purchase this for the collection? Is it in the beginning of your collection, or is it somewhere in the middle, or is it recent?
This was the first book I bought.
This is the first book. That's very important.
Which is quite interesting. I started buying in the most silly way. So you're going to talk about the disciplined approach, and I'm going to talk about the undisciplined approach. My husband, Robert, my late husband, and I collected together, and we were very involved in our private collecting, but also trying to do something that would take our museum in our hometown of Dallas, and working with other collecting families, really upgrade the collections for our community. So we had limited resources, and we were very focused on what we were trying to do to not only enjoy ourselves, but also with this eye towards it coming later into the public realm. When Robert died, I felt a deep need to kind of back away from the contemporary art world, which I succeeded in doing for about 10 minutes. But I thought, well, I'll go to Maastricht. I've never been to Maastricht, and I'll just learn stuff. I won't be tempted to buy anything. And within 10 minutes, I'm in this wonderful stand looking at medieval manuscripts, and I stayed there for 5 hours the first day.
Wow.
And
Commitment.
it took me 4 hours to get the gentleman to talk to me. Because he had such a bias against Americans. He said, Americans just come in and they want to know, what's the price? And he said, you actually ask some questions first. And I thought,
Is that true, Danny? About American collectors?
I think about that.
Okay, you come back on that.
It's not true.
Okay.
No,
it's not true.
no.
It's not true. Sometimes we don't ask the price right off.
I think it's very rude to ask the price to a dealer. I think you should
As a
just
first question,
give them your checkbook and fill in the appropriate amount. I think that would be much more better.
Makes your
manners.
life easy as a dealer.
Yeah.
You always want to know, though, can I even begin to fantasize about this? You know, and especially with something quite new, I had no idea of what I call the order of magnitude. I mean, I just had no way to understand that. So, but we did stay, and the next day I went back for many more hours.
But without showing the next picture, the next slides, I mean, for you it might be a small step, but for the audience it might be rather shocking to have this and then the next one, which is Robert Gober.
You know, I like to keep them guessing. This is really more in my wheelhouse, I think, in terms of the work in the collection and what people think about it. Robert Gober, I believe, is one of the most important and most interesting and vital sculptors of the 20th century. I just was last week at his big opening at MoMA, and it was breathtaking. He is so smart and so completely, I think, vulnerable in the way he makes his art. You can't help but, this is creepy, right? But with the real human hair and the loopy little girl, lost legs, and this old-fashioned three-legged stool, but then these breasts, which I thought was kind of a very silly response to Bathsheba. But to me, there's something that grabs me right there about, he's saying something about family, about domesticity, about loss. I don't know what all, but is in his mind. But this vocabulary that he's developed, these legs show up all the time, these breasts, sometimes one man's breast, one woman's breast juxtaposed. These, as I said, this alphabet that he, jumbles together and returns to over decades. I find that quite extraordinary.
Is it important for you to find the right words and to explain why you exactly want to have an object? Or is it just, I just want to have it because I just want to have it? I feel I need this
well, collectors
to have.
are crazy. They're crazy.
Is
I mean,
that so?
True collectors, they're...
Crazy
they're,
in what sense?
Well, they do have, they always talk about, I need, we don't have any needs, but we have true desires, and sometimes they're, I don't know.
That's true.
Do you feel about this? Sometimes I can't sleep at night, you just think about something, and then it's like you get possessed a bit.
I think the desire to own something, particularly works of art, is almost overpowering. It can take over your life. It becomes, as you say, a desire. It's like when you're a young man and you desire a beautiful young girl, you go crazy in your mind with desire to obtain that person. Once you've got it, it's on to the next. I'm not saying, and this is not me personally, of course, I wouldn't be like that.
You're completely loyal
I believe
and
in
devoted.
chivalry, whatever that is. And I think the desire to own is incredible. It can go through the whole spectrum of the human condition, from children collecting postage stamps to little child in Africa collecting Coca-Cola bottle tops, to there's been many books written, philosophical studies and debates about why people need to collect. It goes back to innate childhood ideas. I suppose Freud would have ideas about it also, but as you get older, and perhaps you can increase your buying potential, you can afford better things, your intellect gets more, you experience more, you have more information at hand, and you go out there. And I think what you do is, between contemporary art and the medieval manuscript, is there parallels to be drawn? It doesn't matter. All art reflects the previous culture. It's all reflecting and relating to something else that's been done. I think what you're doing is amazing. I suppose you could see, you mentioned about the breasts of Bathsheba and the breasts here. That's for you to see.
It's an easy conversational way to
just
go
makes
into it,
conversation, but they're both, I do find this actually quite a interesting work of art.
Well,
do I find it beautiful? No, not beautiful at all.
Oh, it's
They're
not
actually
supposed
quite
to be
ugly.
beautiful.
But I find it challenging and interesting, and you can talk about it, and it creates debate and discussion. Therefore, it has its relevant time now in your house.